In this video, we're covering what to do when your nonprofit has no money.
Hello, we are Ted and Lisa Snyder, and we are nonprofit consultants because we believe a better world needs healthier nonprofits. Now, it is shockingly common how often we hear about nonprofits having no money
Or negative money.
or negative money. Now, no money might mean different things to different people. It might mean that there's literally $0 in the account, or it might mean that you maybe are struggling to look more than like 30 days out because you're like, I don't know if we can handle our expenses. And so whatever that means, we're going to give you 3 specific things that you can do when you have no money to start fixing the problem and start moving forward in a way that's effective and doable for you right now.
Absolutely. So first of all, look at your vision and what you can do. It can be so easy to look at the problem and say, look at all the things we can't do. But I mean, everybody's got that problem, right? You could look at all the things that you're not able to do because you don't have funding, and there's an infinite amount of those things. But there are a select few things that when you just focus, you can do, you can accomplish. First of all, you can set out and do parts of your mission. Like you can actually do some of the things that you do as a nonprofit. They probably will take some time. They're probably going to take some manpower. They're probably going to take some volunteer efforts. But there are things that you can do that require little to no funding that are in line with your vision.
Now, the reason that we say to do what you can do, especially those things that are free, that take more time and less money, is one trap that nonprofits get stuck in is they say, well, I can't do anything until I have this $10,000 grant, or I can't do anything until I can do this big event. And what happens for everyone out on the outside looking in is they see a nonprofit who isn't doing anything at all. They see a nonprofit who's talking about raising money, but isn't actually making any impact or moving toward their vision at all. So even if it's not how you dream of your nonprofit working down the road in the future, you can start looking at what things can you do today with a minimal amount of resources and start to at least move forward in there, because then the people who are paying attention to what you're doing are seeing that you are making a difference and that you are moving forward on that vision. I mean, we've talked to nonprofit leaders who are waiting for that thing one day and in the meantime aren't doing anything. And because of that, they're actually losing trust with their donors, and their donors are kind of leaving because they are seeing that the nonprofit isn't doing anything, rather than seeing a nonprofit who's saying, it doesn't matter what we have, we will make a difference in our community within our vision. And we are going to do this in a way that in the future, we're going to be able to execute how we truly envision this working. But in the meantime, not having resources isn't going to stop us from doing something. So start doing something, because it's hard to rally people when you're not doing anything.
And I'll also say too, just because you envision something looking a certain way doesn't mean it needs to get done that certain way. There are ways that you can do a 5K that cost a lot of money. And there are ways that you can do a 5K that cost 0 money, right? You just have to think through and say, you know what? The specific way in which I envisioned it might not be the way that we can do it right now. And that's okay. It is okay to do things in a way that is not perfect. You know, that perfection paralyzation that happens, especially with leaders. Don't let that get to you. Say, you know what, this doesn't need to be perfect. Let's go and let's accomplish something. Because when you're doing something in your organization, whether it costs you money or not, when you're actually accomplishing your vision, you're creating stories. And stories are what can really start to funnel in people into wanting to volunteer, into wanting to share their networks, and into wanting to share their money and make donations.
Yes, and that leads into number 2. Share the stories. Share past stories and share current stories that you are currently creating. A lot of times when a nonprofit ends up in looking down at their spreadsheets and saying, we don't have the money to do what we're envisioning doing, one of the first things that go is the communication with the people who are kind of following what's happening. This might be posting stories to different social media platforms, sending out your weekly or monthly or quarterly email, or however you communicate with your people. Or maybe it's even sharing stories that are currently happening to your volunteers. It's easy to get so in the weeds that we forget to continue sharing those stories and sharing stories that also have metrics tied into them. Now, if you want to talk about an impactful story, It's great to have a story of here's this huge event that we did. But think about the power that you can have if you say, you know what, even when we're going through lean times, here's this awesome story that we had and we didn't have the resources. And so our organization got creative. It's so powerful to be able to start sharing those stories and letting people know that you are still moving forward and you are still making a difference. Yeah, a lot of times organizations, they stop moving toward their vision and they stop sharing stories, and then they can't figure out why people just don't care about what they're doing or why they don't want to contribute. And it's because of those two things. Because in the short term, as leaders, it's easy to freeze and get so focused on one area that we forget to do the things that are going to actually help us get out of the hole that we're in and to help us to actually move forward.
Right. Investors, donors, people who think of their donations like an investment want to invest in an expansion of an already working model. It's a lot harder to get someone to donate on faith that their money is going to do something that it's the first thing,
Mhm.
right? And so if you show them, hey, this is what we've done so far, they're like, hey, if I donate $50, they can do more of that thing. They actually can see, and there's a tangible reward for their investment. It might not be a specific reward for themselves, like purchasing a product, but they do want to know. Donors want to know that when they put their money to something, it's going to actually happen. And your stories that are currently happening and the stories that you've already done are proof of that. They're the tangible product that they know that I can purchase more of those stories.
And this is something that has changed culturally in the last decade or so. We were talking to someone not too long ago who does a lot with Kickstarter, and he was saying in certain areas, it used to be that you could throw out an idea and people would fund it. But now, with certain areas, you actually have to have the project almost all the way done, if not complete, before people will fund it because they will fund the marketing. But in some areas, the Kickstarter participants have gotten so burned by the people not completing the project that faith has been lost, trust has been lost, and they're like, "Show me you can do something before I'm going to give you any money at all." Um, Maybe a decade or so ago, you used to be able to come to the table with an idea, and that was enough to get people to start giving money, and it has changed. The same thing has happened in nonprofits. It used to be that someone who had a nonprofit idea, people were a little bit more willing to give and say, hey, you know what? I believe that this is possible, that it could be done. In the day and age where we are now, a lot of people have been burned by people starting nonprofits because starting a nonprofit has become just more common, I think, in a lot of ways than it had been in the past. That they want to see that something is actually being done, that something is effective, and that the leader is actually leading in the direction that they say that they are going to lead in the future before they are willing to give the money that maybe they would have in the past. And so we cannot rely we cannot rely on just being able to ask people for that money, although yes, we do need to be asking,
Mhm.
but really making sure that we are making an impact and having current active stories that we can be sharing to show people not only do we have the idea, but we are willing to do the work that is necessary, even if it's not our ideal situation.
You got to remember that because of the internet, the world is shrinking a lot and people have access to way more information and way more options when it comes to donating and giving. And
Yeah.
part of the reason that people have become so selective in how they choose to donate is because they have lots of really great options to donate to. If they have $50 lying around and they just want to do something good with it, it is so easy to find a great organization out there that's going to do that. And so you have to, in a sense, almost compete with those other great causes and say, hey, this is why this cause is important. This is what makes this cause different. And this is how we have already done stuff. So you know that when you put $20 toward this or $20,000 toward this, that it's going to happen. It's just
Mhm.
going to happen on a greater scale. We're going to be able to do it for more people. We're going to be able to help the world change even more.
Yes. Now, number three coming out of this is to make a fundraising plan. There's a reason we didn't put this first, and it's because you have to still be doing the stuff even while you're creating the plan and starting to execute on the plan. Fundraising plans typically take a little bit of time. You're not just going to turn around and start doing stuff tomorrow, or at least getting the results right away. You might, but for the most part, a fundraising plan is going to take an extended amount of time, and there might be different levels or layers of communication, possible events coming up. Ways that you're going to be contacting new donors. Maybe you're going to reach out to a certain number of new people every week, just trying to build up more relationships within the community. There's a lot of different ways that you can create a fundraising plan, but you're probably going to need some time to do it. One thing that will make your plan more effective is by actually taking action now and having those stories to share so that when you're talking to the potential donors, the stories that you're sharing aren't from 3 years ago or aren't, well, down the road, we wanna do X, Y, and Z. You want stories that are current, that are tangible, and that the donors can see, man, this person, they really don't care how many resources they have. They are going to do what their vision says they're going to do. So start creating that fundraising plan and start figuring out how you're gonna move forward. It does not help to just sit there and look at the problem and not create a plan to get out of it. Although sometimes, I mean, it can be hard to create the plan when you're in the muck.
Absolutely. Great fundraising plans have three parts. They have the preparation, they have the execution, and they have the follow up. Make sure when you're making a fundraising plan that you've thought through all of those things. You want to follow up with people who have considered and actually made a donation to your cause. You want to make sure you have great systems and structures in place so that way when you contact people, you can take notes and make sure that because theoretically you're going to be contacting a lot of different people. You want to make sure that you have a place to be able to, you know, make sure that you're not calling the same person 15 times asking the same question. That can feel really, really terrible as the person on that side of the phone call saying, you just asked me this last week. So make sure you have good plans and structures in place for the preparation, for the execution, and for the follow-up. That's going to look really different depending on the fundraising plan you're doing for an event. That's going to look really different from, say, a fundraising blast where you're going to do just a couple months of pushing, finding a bunch of new donors, versus maybe like a follow-up campaign where you're talking to people who have previously donated and figuring out how to get them to maybe buy in a little bit more into what you're doing. So creating a fundraising plan is extremely important. Without a plan, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Absolutely. Well, if this has got your gears spinning, you're thinking, hey, this is some forward movement that I need to take, that I want to take as a leader in my nonprofit organization. We have another video that might help you out when you're considering this. Actually, it definitely will. It's called The Number One Problem Impacting Nonprofits. We highly encourage you to check out that video. It'll have some information as you go into fixing the problem of not having any money. We'll see you guys over in that video.